Hey everyone, I'm Hannah. I work with the OGRAIN program at UW-Madison here in Madison, Wisconsin. Today we're going to talk about what it's like to take a soil sample from the field to the lab, and then what it looks like to get a soil report back from the lab. Here I have a bag of soil that I've sampled from one of our research plots in Arlington, Wisconsin. I took about 10 subsamples in a W formation at 6 inches deep. You'll want to sample at however deep your plow depth is, just for your reference. So you'll want to sample in your field when it's not too wet or too dry or frozen, but essentially whenever you can get out there is the right time to soil sample. And you'll want to sample at the same time every time you do sample so you can accurately track those changes over time. If you do need a recommendation for a season to sample, go with fall, because that's before you're planning your next planting season, at the start of your planning, so you can prepare for your yields and nutrient requirements for the next year. So you can take this bag of soil directly to the lab, or you can ship it to them. But either way, you'll need to fill out a soil sample sheet. It's important to stick with the same lab when you take your soil samples in, because every lab does their testing a little bit differently. So to track changes over time, you want to make sure that the lab is doing the same thing every single time. We listed a few different resources about actually taking a soil sample in your field and some reputable soil labs that you can find near you in the Soil Testing Information Guide, which you can find linked below. All right, now we're gonna fill out our soil information sheet. All right, the first part is easy. Your name, address, etc. Next, I'll list the total number of samples that I'm turning in. For plow depth, I'll put 6 inches since that's how deep I sampled. Then I'll put the county of where my soil came from. In our case, that's Columbia. Here under Field ID, I'll put the name of my field. It can be anything from Westfield to 502, whatever you want to call it. Here, I'll put my sample number, which can be anything you make up, but we'll go with 1. You can check any of these boxes if they're relevant, but since I don't irrigate and we didn't till this field, we're not going to check any of them. This box is for your soil name. You can either go to the USDA Web Soil Survey and find the exact name for the soil, or write the soil texture down here. At Arlington, we have a Plano silt loam, so I'll write that here. You'll write the acres in your field here, and if it's sloped, here. I've picked a random crop rotation common for some OGRAIN farmers. Corn for corn, grain, soybean for grain, alfalfa, and alfalfa. So I'll find the corresponding crop codes below, which are 17, 48, 2, and 1, and I'll write them here. I'll write my yield goals for each crop in the next column. So at Arlington, we might expect somewhere around 171 to 190 bushels per acre for corn grain, 56 to 65 bushels for soybean grain, and for first year alfalfa, maybe 1.5 to 2.5 tons, and then second year, 5.6 to 6.5 tons once alfalfa is established. Here's where things get to be even more specific, where you can note the amendments to your field that were taken account for nutrient credits. Here's where things get to be even more specific, where you can note the amendments to your field that were for nutrient credits, like having a legume cover crop or maybe applying manure. Those will be taken into account for giving your nutrient recommendation rates. So at the bottom here, you'll see that a routine test includes pH, the lime requirement, your organic matter, the available phosphorus and potassium will be reported. You can also ask for these micronutrients to be tested, which you'll see are recommended for different situations and for different crops. You can see that all down here. You'll hand this sheet in with your payment or check the call me box. And in a few weeks, you'll have your samples back in hand. So you can take your soil sample to the lab or you can ship it to them along with your soil sample sheet, information sheet. But I decided to take it to the lab. So let's go. We're gonna go drop it off. Ding dong. All right, so you can drop it off there. They'll take care of you. Super easy. In a few weeks back, get your report. It's been a few weeks and we've gotten our soil test report back. So now we're going to walk through what it looks like to read your soil test report in this example that we have back from the soils lab. Okay, so we have our soil test report back. So the lab uses a series of calibrations based on your soil type and the nutrient removal of each crop along with the expected yield to give nutrient recommendations in pounds per acre. You can apply that to a variety of OMRI approved, so organic approved, soil amendments to decide what to apply to your field. But today we'll just walk through our test result. So we have our cropping sequence at the top here. And then we have our yield goal range. Then we have the anticipated crop nutrient needs here in pounds per acre for each cropping sequence. And then the nutrient recommendations to apply to each field over here. The next section is based on the maximum return to synthetic nitrogen fertilizer in dollars per bushel. So if nitrogen fertilizer prices are high and you have a higher ratio, the lab is suggesting that you apply less nitrogen than if it's relatively inexpensive. Generally, this ratio is around 0.1, so you can look at those rates for your recommended nitrogen. But read the guidelines below here. You'll notice that if there's more residue during planting, the lab suggests that you apply more nitrogen. If your nitrogen is all organic, you'll use the top end of the range. And then think about applying 20 pounds per acre starter nitrogen. Then there are recommendations or suggestions for soils with high organic matter, other nitrogen tests, and different soil textures. So pay attention to these. Next, we have additional information based on the test results. This will vary for each field. Just below this, you'll see the soil test interpretation for your cropping sequence. We can see that our phosphorus and potassium levels fall in the low category based on the soil test and our crop nutrient needs. This means that the soil lab recommendations will suggest adding nutrients to get us into this optimum level. And when you're here, this would suggest you don't need to apply anything beyond the crop nutrient needs. Below, we'll see the hardcore numbers from the laboratory analysis. We have pH, we have organic matter, we have phosphorus, potassium, we have your lime requirement, your calcium, magnesium, estimated cation exchange capacity, or CEC. Then we have your micronutrients, your boron, manganese, zinc, and sulfur. The lab has interpretations for these numbers for your secondary macronutrients, calcium and magnesium here, and those micronutrients over here. You'll see that calcium and magnesium are at their optimum levels, but boron is listed as very low, VL, and manganese is optimum, zinc is low, and sulfur is low. They suggest confirming the need for boron with a plant tissue analysis, and if the plant is deficient, applying 3 pounds of boron per acre, and then doing the same for zinc. But they say in the crop rotation, there's unlikely to be a response. Okay, this was a lot to throw at you, but take a look at that soil test guide that we put together, and we'll link to it below. That'll list a ton of awesome resources and walk you through this once again. But also remember to stick with the same lab for your soil tests, since labs use their same protocol and different labs might use slightly different protocols, so your results may vary slightly. And remember that soil tests are just a tool in your toolbox, so it's important to have them and look at them over time. But they're just a representation of what is happening in the soil at the moment that you test. There are many kinds of tests out there, but a routine soil test like what we walked through just now is a really great way to pay attention to what's happening underfoot. Thanks.